What if someone built a massive stone temple thousands of years before anyone thought humans were smart enough to do it? Here is the fact that will shake everything you thought you knew about history. Göbekli Tepe, a site in southern Turkey, was built around 9600 BCE. That is over 11,000 years ago. And here is the part that stops people cold. Whoever built it did not just walk away and leave it behind. They buried it on purpose. This place should not exist, not according to history books, not according to science, but it does. And the closer you look, the stranger it gets. Let's set the scene. It is 9600 BCE. No cities, no farms, no writing. Humans at this time were hunter-gatherers, people who spent their days searching for food, not building giant stone temples. At least, that is what we thought. Standard history tells us that complex society came later, after farming, after villages, after thousands of years of slow progress. Organized construction was supposed to come much further down the line. But Göbekli Tepe does not follow those rules. It shows up on the timeline thousands of years too early. A massive, organized, clearly intentional construction project, built by people who were supposedly not organized enough to pull it off. Something does not add up, and that is exactly what makes this site so important. Walk into Göbekli Tepe, and the first thing you notice are the pillars. These are not simple rocks stacked on top of each other. They are T-shaped limestone columns, some standing over 18 feet tall and weighing close to 20 tons. They were shaped with precision, arranged in circles, and decorated with carvings so detailed that modern archaeologists are still studying them. These pillars were not accidents. They required planning, skill, and a workforce that understood what they were building and why. For a group of hunter-gatherers who supposedly had no real social structure, no permanent settlements, and no tradition of large-scale construction, that is a very hard thing to explain. And yet, here these pillars stand.
The carvings on those pillars are some of the most fascinating parts of Göbekli Tepe. You will find foxes, lions, bulls, scorpions, vultures, and snakes, all carved in high relief, meaning they actually pop out from the stone in a way that looks almost three-dimensional. These are not rough sketches. They show animals in motion, full of energy and detail. Archaeologists believe these carvings were not just decoration. Based on what we know about how ancient people used symbols across the world, these images very likely carried spiritual or cultural meaning, a kind of visual language the builders used to communicate something important, something beyond everyday life. The level of artistic skill on display here is, by every measure, far more advanced than it should be at this point in human history. Here is where things get really interesting. Those 20-ton limestone pillars did not appear out of thin air. They were cut from a quarry about a quarter-mile away and transported to the site. And they did this without wheels, without pack animals, without cranes, without any of the tools we would consider basic for a construction project today. How? That question does not have a clean answer yet. Based on what we know from similar ancient sites around the world, the most likely explanation involves large numbers of people working together, ropes, wooden sledges, raw human strength, and an enormous amount of coordination. But that level of teamwork does not happen by accident. It takes leadership, it takes planning, it takes a society. And that alone rewrites what we thought we knew about this era of human history. Most people imagine Göbekli Tepe as a single ruin you can walk around in an afternoon. But what has been excavated so far is only a small portion of the total site. Researchers estimate there are dozens of circular enclosures still underground, untouched, waiting to be uncovered. The area that has already been dug up is remarkable on its own, but it may only be the beginning. Think of it like an iceberg. What you see above the surface is impressive. What sits below is potentially much larger and far more complex. Archaeologists have barely scratched the surface of what is actually buried at this site. Every season of digging brings new discoveries, and every new discovery raises more questions. To really understand how old Göbekli Tepe is, you need a comparison. Stonehenge in England, one of the most famous ancient monuments in the world, was built around 3000 BCE. Göbekli Tepe is 7,000 years older than that. The Great Pyramids of Giza were built around 2600 BCE. Göbekli Tepe is 8,000 years older. 8,000 years. That is a number that is almost impossible to picture. When the people at Göbekli Tepe were carving their pillars and arranging their stone circles, the cultures that would one day build the pyramids and Stonehenge did not even exist yet. This site belongs in a category completely by itself, and it forces us to ask just how far back advanced human thinking actually goes.
One of the strangest things about Göbekli Tepe is where it sits. The site is built on top of a barren, rocky ridge in southeastern Turkey. There are no rivers nearby, no springs, no obvious water sources that would make this a logical place to live or build anything. For hunter-gatherers, water was survival. You built your life near water. You did not drag 20-ton stones to a dry hilltop miles from the nearest reliable source. And yet, here it is. This could suggest that the people who built Göbekli Tepe were not trying to survive here. They were trying to worship here. The location was very likely chosen for spiritual reasons, not practical ones. Whatever this place meant to the people who built it, it was worth the enormous effort of building in one of the least convenient spots they could have chosen. There is something unusual about the sound inside the stone enclosures at Göbekli Tepe. Researchers studying the site have noted that the circular limestone walls create natural acoustic effects, meaning sound behaves differently inside them. Voices and low tones echo and carry in ways that would be hard to ignore if you were standing inside one of these enclosures. Based on how other ancient ceremonial sites around the world were designed, many of which also show careful attention to sound, this could suggest that Göbekli Tepe was built with ritual in mind. Gatherings, chanting, music. The stones may not just have been built to impress the eye. They may have been built to shape what people heard and felt when they stood inside, to make the experience of being there feel like something beyond the ordinary world. In 2025, researchers used ground-penetrating radar to scan the unexcavated mounds surrounding the known structures at Göbekli Tepe. What they found was striking. The scans revealed what appear to be even larger structures hidden beneath the surface, formations that could be bigger and more complex than anything already uncovered. This means the part of the site we have seen so far may not even be the most impressive part. The largest and most elaborate structures might still be buried, untouched, exactly where they were left over 10,000 years ago. The full picture of what was built here is still being put together, and every new scan seems to suggest the answer is far more extraordinary than anyone initially expected.
Göbekli Tepe is not alone. About 35 miles away in southeastern Turkey, there is another site called Karahan Tepe. It was discovered more recently and shares many of the same features: T-shaped pillars, animal carvings, circular enclosures built with clear intention and skill. In some ways, Karahan Tepe appears even more elaborate, with sculptures carved directly into the bedrock and pillars shaped to look human-like in certain sections. What this tells us is that Göbekli Tepe was not a single isolated event. It was part of a wider regional pattern, an entire culture of people building complex, symbolic, spiritual monuments across the landscape. This was not one unusually clever group of people. This was a whole world we are only beginning to find. Now for the part that no one can fully explain. Around 8000 BCE, something changed. The people who built Göbekli Tepe, who spent generations carving perfect pillars and creating one of the most complex spiritual sites in human history, stopped. And then they buried it. Not partially, not accidentally, they deliberately filled in the enclosures with soil, rocks, and debris, covering everything they had built layer by layer until it was completely hidden beneath the ground. Nobody knows why. Some researchers think it may have been a ritual act, a ceremonial ending meant to close out the site's purpose in a respectful and deliberate way. Others wonder if it was meant to protect the place, to keep it safe for something or someone in the future. Based on the care that seems to have gone into the burial, the way the infill was laid in, the act itself appears to have been intentional and controlled, not frantic or desperate. We do not have the answer yet. What we do know is that this place survived underground for over 10,000 years, hidden, protected, waiting, and it is only now beginning to give up its secrets. If this got you thinking, drop a comment below. What do you think they were trying to hide? Why would a culture spend generations building something this remarkable only to bury it? Give this video a like if it gave you something to think about, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss what we uncover next. The story of Göbekli Tepe is far from over.